And I have the honor and privilege of introducing our speaker today. This is Joanne Selinske. Am I saying that correctly?
No, Selinske, but that's all right. Selinske.
And Joanne is a fairly new member of IBIRD as an affiliate with a very diverse background in transpersonal counseling, in hypnotherapy, and as an author of 3 books. The titles of them are The Awakened Soul, The Wisdom of Souls, and The Little Book. Is there a part and more to that?
Yeah, the little book, it's a crazy title by Llewellyn, Llewellyn's Little Book of Life Between Lives.
I have that.
Yeah.
And all 3 of her books are exactly with what we all do. It's interlife, past life, and transpersonal hypnotherapy. So she's got a very grounded experience background. And today she's going to introduce us to the benefits of transpersonal hypnotherapy, which I'm sure we'll all resonate with. And I'm very grateful that you're here, Joanne, and excited to hear your presentation.
Thank you. Okay. So I just want, thank you. I just want everybody to know, I'm going to put some context, then I'm going to turn to Holly to put some slides. And then depending on how the time goes, there's more informal back and forth to share with you if there's time. So you will get, if you haven't already, oh, sorry, did I?
just want to say one more thing. Turn off your mics, please, until we have question and answers, because the video will come through better. And secondly, the materials that I emailed you will save until after the presentation. She's going to have a slideshow for you, so put those aside.
Right. Okay. And what you received, actually, the one PowerPoint will be on the screen. Holly's going to manage that when I get to that. And the second thing is it includes the context that I'm going to introduce and also information at the end that I hope I get to, but I might not. So I didn't want to confuse people by putting it all in the PowerPoint. Okay. A little bit of context about me in addition to what was sent out. The one thing I note is I'm well aware that many of the people that are in this organization have been doing transpersonal work for decades. I myself am a relative newcomer to this, have been doing it for 12 years. So that's important to know. But what I'm speaking about tonight is just not from my own experience, because for 5 or 6 years, I lost track. I was very involved with the Michael Newton Institute, and I was on the research committee. And to just frame some of what I'm about to tell you, the several hundred people that are in the Newton Institute, and that's just one institute of a couple of hundred people who do this work, had in total, as of a year ago, done more than 50,000 life between life regressions. Okay. So that's one thing I want you to keep in mind. I'm speaking from a broader perspective than my own. I don't know if I'm up to 1,000. I have no idea. My system is alphabetized, not numeratized. Anyway, so that's one thing. The second, though, about me is because I'm a contextual thinker, I want you to understand the perspective that I'm going to get into the details from. The first one is, this work, in my opinion, and my experience and the colleagues I associate with, is framed from the perspective that our existence is well beyond these bodies and what we experience in our day-to-day, I'll call it reality, in quotes. That's one point. And the second very key part to that is that once this body dies, it almost doesn't matter, because in fact, there are other bodies that will choose at a later time, et cetera, et cetera. And that even in between our incarnations in this body or others, we have quite a full and vibrant life somewhere in the astral realms. All right, so that's number one. The second thing about this practice, from my perspective, is that while for me, being trained as a life between life hypnotherapist is what started me down this road, what I and a lot of my colleagues realized is that getting somebody in a very deep a deep hypnotic state, you can achieve the same results that you might in a life between life hypnotherapy. And I know there's some of my colleagues who might like flail about that. I even say that out loud, but I'm speaking to you from a perspective that I've done probably for every one LBL I've done, I probably have done 8 or 9 other transpersonal sessions, and the client's experiences in them can be almost identical. So that's another thing I want to talk to you about. The point though is that until you get the client in that really deep trance, you can't kind of hopscotch from the subconscious to the superconscious, which is where this work that I'm talking to you about tonight happens. Now, in that state, as those of you who've been doing this, I did hear at least one person, but maybe there are others that'll listen to this who are newer to this work, is when people get in that state, as many of you know, they're interacting with their highest self, or I call it the soul self, but whether you call it the higher self or the soul self, they're interacting with their own spirit guides and other wise spiritual beings. Sometimes they interact with their ancestors. Sometimes they actually, as many of you know, they interact with people that are still alive with the higher self of that person. And occasionally for my clients, they're blessed to interact with the divine, him, herself. All right. Although that tends to be a rarer occasion. All right. The other big contextual point about the practice is that in addition to the healing and the learning that takes place in these sessions, people are literally traversing the realms of existence. Now, I'm quite interested myself in the experiences of people who can travel out of body, as well as the experiences of people who've had near-death experience. And in fact, my own, if you'd say decades ago, interest in transpersonal work, long before I even knew that word, was in my own exposure to the writings and research from people who've had near-death experiences. And there's a lot of corollaries in that, including in one of the pieces I added in the last page and what you're going to receive. Okay, so you've got people traversing the realms of existence. You have some people who were interested, or maybe even didn't specifically say they were interested in finding out their soul purpose or soul contracts. So that's another key piece. Now, one of the things I tell every client in advance, and some of you might disagree, I'd love to hear it at the end, is that the client comes in the room with their interests. They think they set the schedule because they either called or sent the email. But in my experience, it was their highest self or the spirit guides who actually got them in the room. And in fact, I go as far as to tell people what's about to happen is more likely what they want to have happen today rather than what you had hoped to happen. And actually, it's very interesting. And I see some head nods. That actually not only frees up the person to relax, I think, more deeply into just the opportunity, but it also, it just has a lot of benefits. And I'm just convinced of it. I can't prove it, but I'm just absolutely convinced of it, that what goes on is not so much what we think we're doing, but that we are agents of what's been orchestrated at a much higher level. Okay, so that's that context. So now I see my role as a facilitator, but as I also tell people before I start, in many ways, we are spiritual investigative reporters, right? For some of our clients, we might not know a thing about them because shy people don't necessarily want to share. I'm not one of these people that has an exhaustive intake form. So sometimes I know very little about what the person who's asked me to facilitate a session about them. Notwithstanding that, which is partly why I made the last point about what happens is being orchestrated at a higher level. Notwithstanding that, the key to being, for example, a good LBL facilitator is like, just keep yourself out of it and keep asking questions. So that's, in my view, is where the facilitation comes in. Now, for another key point for those few who have not been doing this work for a really long time is the piece that the piece of gold, I would say, from my LBL training and any LBL that I myself have facilitated and read about, et cetera, is the concept of coming to understand that the soul has a plan for the lifetime, and that the soul's plan for the lifetime may not be the same plan as the ego personality designs. And in fact, I'd go as far as to say, when there's, I call it, when there's dis-ease in a life or challenges, it may very well be that the soul's plan isn't what's driving the person through life. And in fact, I call it the chafing in the human's life, and what the soul wanted is causing the disease. So when you, in my view, when you do this work, you have to be really operating on two levels. You have to understand that the person that presents comes in with their ego personality story, but what might be behind the ego personality story is the soul's plan for the lifetime and the soul's intention for the lifetime. And that those of us who also do counseling after sessions, the key in terms of future healing is the reconciliation between those two things. When it's become clear in a session or a second session or a third session that the two are different. Okay, so that's my operating principle. Now, I have to tell you that I also tell, and I know some of you do this, similar things, because you've said in other shares. I myself work with Archangel Raphael. I don't assume, this is why, number one, I don't assume that there's an automatic healing of everything that has even been presented in a session. Number one. Number two, I think the higher being do a lot better job at healing than we people at this level might be able to do. Now, but before I ever call Archangel Raphael in, most of the time near the end of the session, I've already told the person during an intake interview that I work with Archangel Raphael and asked their permission for that. I have never had anybody, in fact, most people light up, even if they haven't told you anything about whether they, connect to the angels or they use that terminology, because that's all it is, quite frankly, at one level. I think that's all it is. It's a title. But anyway, that being aside, the healing capacity of the higher beings, I think, is much greater than our own. So I tell people, and I haven't had anybody ever say, oh, please don't call Archangel Raphael in, I mean, seriously. Now, this is one of the things, and I'm segueing now into my clients. Now, an interesting thing for me, and Virginia and I both attended a training 5 or 6, 7 years ago. I don't even know. Anyway, of 30 of our colleagues. And then subsequently, the Newton Institute, we gathered another almost 50 people together a couple of years after that. And one of the things that I've learned from listening to other colleagues is that in the aggregate, now this isn't everybody, but in the aggregate, certain professionals have clients who fit certain categories that somebody else has never seen a client who's had that issue, right? So it's I think it's a really interesting phenomenon. But for me, what that led me to realize is that the higher beings are even involved, in my opinion, in deciding who they're going to send somebody to, because they have a better idea of who's the more perfect match. Having said that, let me just say that in my case, because if you found my advertising or somehow somebody told you about me and you went on my website, you would know that I only do spiritual hypnotherapy. And by the way, I realized after I sent the first blurb out, I use transpersonal spiritual hypnotherapy almost interchangeably. So when I'm talking to you, I'm speaking broadly from my view that once I get you in the astral realms, you can call it what you want, but it's your eternal experience. So for me, that's a spiritual experience. But again, you know, I don't ever quibble about what somebody else calls something else because, all right. Okay, so back to, in my client background, in my portfolio, my hundreds of people, maybe 1,000, everybody I've worked with already has a sense that they are an eternal being. Now, they may not even use those words, but they know that this one life isn't it. And they've reached a point. And by the way, most of my clients have been either in therapy or counseling. Most of them are incredibly well-read, right? They're libraries in terms of, you know, self-help, transpersonal work, broadly defined, extensive reading. They have a huge amount of insight already. And they've come to this work because they've reached a point where they realize, I cannot explain it based on everything I know about my life. So they not only have their insight about their life, but they have a deep understanding of the context of human experience. And they say to themselves, wow, still can't explain it. Now, for a subset of those people, there's still an amount of serendipity involved in them coming in the room. And I suspect this is true for many of you. I can't tell you how, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's pretty high of the number of people who have said something like this. Oh, I read Brian Weiss's, what was that? Many Lies, right? Many Masters. Oh, 30 years ago. And I wanted to schedule a session. And something more recently happens, but often it's not even that second thing. It's often the third thing, like somebody saying to them, have you ever thought about having a past life regression? It's like there's this sequence of things in some people's cases stretching across decades, which finally brings them in the room. And I laugh thinking our higher selves and the spirit guides must just think we're slow learners, right? You know, it's like 30 years later, you're coming in the room. But anyway, okay. So, but before they arrange with me, they know I only do spiritual hypnotherapy, transpersonal work. So they're not interested. So already we've got a subset of people. This is not, you know, this is not your general public. And by the way, that's a lead into something else, because in my view, right, if you think about how minuscule statistically, right, there's almost 8 billion people on the planet, will be any day now, right? 8 billion people, the small number who have the opportunity, the access, or the desire to have these sessions. In my view, once the soul, and this is a big point actually, once the soul has made its plan for a lifetime, it has already arranged in that life the opportunities for the healing, the learning, the karmic balancing, and the ultimate awakening to divinity that it wants, but it's embedded them in day-to-day life, literally. I mean, it's like life is a different kind of therapy. It's a longer term, stretched out, working through your soul's plan. Now, why is this key to a practitioner? Once I got onto this really early in my training, I realized that what people say in day-to-day parlance is a reflection in many cases of past lives. And I've concluded we are literally each of us is a walking billboard of our past lives. And the more you know about transpersonal work, the more you can actually it's like watching, well, I don't know what the shorthand would be, but it is like watching life in a different way. It really puts a filter that you can see life in a different way. Anyway, all right. I'm still talking about the clients. Here's another thing. My clients have represent almost every religion and many clients without a religion to begin with. However, at the point they've scheduled a session with me, I would say almost 100%, they do have some concept of a higher power or a creative source. Now, what they call that higher power, creative source, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. A lot of people have a lot of different titles for that. Okay, but that's one commonality. Now, I've already said they know that they don't, well, maybe I didn't say this, but they do know, my clients do know that they don't die. Ultimately, they don't die. They just transform into some other form, not to be redundant. And they agree, and this is most of you know this, a Teilhard de Chardin quote. They agree that we're spiritual beings having human experiences and not the opposite. We're not human beings trying to have spiritual experiences. I mean, whether they've seen that quote or they could, regurgitate it, experientially, they know that they are a spiritual being and they see this life as part of a grander mosaic. I call it a mosaic. Okay. Now, interestingly for me, my clients by life characteristic are well established. Almost the vast majority of them are over 40. Life's been settled and they begin asking themselves the big questions. Okay. I have some, but not too many younger clients. Now, I've already said about the insight and, well, actually, I've already made those points. I have little notes here. So that's the context for which we are now going to go to the PowerPoint, which Holly has graciously volunteered to do, because to be honest, even after all these years, I'm abysmal at even shifting the slides. All right, so okay, again, I'm speaking from my not just my client pool, but those of the colleagues that I've shared with. So now I'm talking about upwards of maybe close to 80 plus people interacting with in deep discussions about their client profiles. Okay, so nothing new to some of you. Each person's journey into the astral realms is unique. I mean, I will tell you this, the more I learn through the experiences of my clients, the more convinced I become that we don't have a clue. We think I mean, really, it is amazing what humanity has in front of it in the last, if you will, 50 years in terms of the number of people practicing what we've learned from near-death experiences, etc. But the more I do this work, the more in awe I am of what we don't know. I mean, I'll just put it out there. Okay, now, for my clients and others, the sessions seem to be, as I've already said, what the higher self wants to have happen. All right, so I already made that point, or a little ahead of myself. Now, the type of session can be a factor, but I've also seen it really, I'd say half the time it doesn't matter. I've had people who asked me to do a past life regression, and once I get them to into the astral world, the first thing that happens is they're sitting, having a conversation, sitting, metaphorically, sitting, having a conversation with a higher being, right? So it can influence, because of course, if you're doing a past life regression and the person has already told you what they're trying to get to the bottom of, and so you're trying to honor what they came in the door wanting to know, you're asking those questions. But I've, as much as that, seen where the higher beings have literally shifted the focus. So that's put into some much broader context. Now, the difference clearly is the spiritual maturity of the person. So somebody, you know, we all know this. Some clients may have had not that many lives, although I would contend that most people doing this, you know, seeking this type of assistance are probably have had a lot more lives than your general population, but there's still a variation. And so what happens in the sessions I facilitate in particular, seems to be pretty heavily influenced by the spiritual maturity. So for example, well, no, I won't go there yet. Now, this is another thing that the last bullet in terms of, I think this is what really Life Between Life work is really emphasized for me, is that whatever's going to happen, it's really been because the soul ultimately has a desire for peace and harmony and resolution and growth. And so when the human, us, we, our clients, aren't living in that peace and harmony and balance, the soul forces the circumstances to prompt, if somebody's paying attention and somebody wants relief, the healing and resolution and learning. Now, I love metaphors. And so to me, this is like you leave the pot on the stove long enough with the liquid in it, and eventually it's going to bubble over. And that's kind of what happens for a lot of our clients. It's the bubbling over that prompts them to get some help. Okay, next slide, Holly. Okay, so this is almost ridiculous to say, but no sessions are alike. However, in my view, there's a commonality of the experience that happens in this session. And one of the main ones in terms of the therapeutic value is that many people gain an understanding of the origin, the real origin of the dis-ease or their misery, or whatever word you want to use. Now, this is key because, you know, many therapeutic approaches take us back through our own current life to look at the role, you know, the impact that our parents, our siblings, or culture, or circumstances had on our life. What traditional therapeutic approaches don't take into account is, number one, the soul planned. The soul picked those contexts. The soul picked those parents. The soul picked that, you know, whether I decided I would go to 12 years of Catholic school, or whether I was born in a country that's Muslim educated, right? My soul picked those contexts. And so that is such a key, it's like, to me, the key in terms of understanding the role of even past lives on current life is putting that into context. Now, clearly, one of the other major gains is when the client, and I've seen people like literally, they might be in a deep trance and they're in a lifetime a couple hundred years ago, and they see a dynamic between, just as an example, I'm a young boy, 14 years old. I just got accidentally killed because I was trying to get myself around a melee on the street. And I say to his soul, do you want to see anybody before I help you move on? And he says, oh yeah, I want to go see my mother. Now he's talking about his mother in that life 400 years ago, right? And the second he gets to that, it's actually a woman that I've gotten the trance, yells out, oh my God, that's my husband in this life. Now, meanwhile, literally, she's still in a deep trance, and she's instantaneously going from 400 years ago to her current life. And that, in my view, you can only achieve that kind of linkage of past to present when you're doing transpersonal work. All right. one of the most common, and I would say for many people, the most valued aspects of the experience is that when we are in that transpersonal state, we're experiencing very often, if not all the time, unconditional love and acceptance. And, you know, I'm sure most of you have seen this. You can see it on the client's face. You can see, like, I know this is probably an old-fashioned word, but, you know, it's almost like they're swooning. You know, like you can see that they literally are experiencing being wrapped in love and feeling totally accepted. And then later tell you when you're in the debrief that that's how they felt. And I've had people have that experience even when much of their experience was interacting with their highest self, and only they had a small amount of interaction with higher beings. So it hasn't just been relegated to an experience with a higher being. So it's a really interesting kind of maybe artifact of astral experiences. Okay, Holly, and next slide. Okay, now, 1 second, I have to take a sip. I guess I should stop for a moment and say, does anybody have any questions at this point that are like burning that before I keep going? And I can't see the people. Wait a second. I guess having said that, I should go to the faces on the bottom of the screen. Okay. I don't see anybody raising their hand, so I'm just going to keep talking for now. Okay. Now, here's another big commonality. The falsely held, this is, to me, this is the crux of the value. And I get a sizable amount of referrals from psychotherapists who appreciate the value of, for example, mostly past life work. This usually happens for somebody who's called me for past life regression. And the therapist and the client have kind of concurred. You just can't explain it. You know, we've been working together for quite some time. You just can't explain it. And so the value for me, that like this is the top of the list, is when there's this connection between once the person sees how it played out in a past life, and then they realize, because this is, by the way, one of my key questions, is once that happened, what did you come to believe? Not just about the situation, because most of the time it was horrific, traumatic, whatever, but about yourself. And it's this crossover of the beliefs, not only just the beliefs, but the coping mechanisms that were then formed. So if the trauma didn't lead to their instantaneous death, and so they had trauma, and then they lived long enough to have to figure out how they were going to cope with the trauma and their new beliefs about the trauma. Then often, very often, they're literally carrying those beliefs and having adopted coping mechanisms that mimic or are exactly like the ones they developed in the prior life. Now, I think one of the easiest ways to convey this is when you find somebody who's had a prior life where their beloved, whether it was their spouse or their partner, died. They were deliriously in love, having a wonderful life, and that beloved died. And they decided that they could never be loved again that deeply, or could love again that deeply. So they spent the rest of their life miserably alone, in their case. And they formed a belief, well, unless I'm with that person who totally, fulfills me, fill in the blank, I can't be happy. It's the belief and the coping mechanism, a similar coping mechanism, which you're easily going to see in the person's life. Okay. In their current life, excuse me. All right. Now, for many of my clients, and to be honest, I'm really stunned at this. And so I have to attribute it to Archangel Raphael. Okay. To be honest, if you told me before I started doing this work that you could have one session with a person and they could their life could change trajectory and they could go from feeling that they're in misery to not, I probably wouldn't have believed you, to be honest. And I am stunned though at how many people seem, even in one session, to make that shift. And you hear back from them later. It's not just they walk out the door happy. However, I have found with my clients that when the trauma was beyond horrific and the similar trauma was repeated in multiple lifetimes, you can't clear that up in one session. I have found that that's not easily cleared up in one session. That's the kind of thing that somebody needs maybe a handful of sessions, maybe a second one, maybe a third one, whatever. But I actually, it was this which prompted me to read history, I should say, I don't want to make it sound like to delve into a fuller understanding of what's happened to humanity over the last couple of thousand years because of the horrors that people were presenting in their past lives. And horrendous things, as many of you know, have happened for thousands of years. And when someone's had that imprint lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, and it's reinforced the beliefs, it can take a lot of teasing out to get to the bottom of. So that's why I make this point that no single session can really sweep that all away in my experience. Now, this, I think, the next and last point on this slide is really the essence, because this is where I said before, we're living lives that our souls planned to have over, I'm already 70, so I've lived 70 years and I've learned a lot of things and I've healed a lot of things. And I am convinced that my soul very methodically mapped out the trajectory of that. Now, I have been separate from the regressions that I've had personal access to. I have been in the process, I believe, of, and I'm using myself as the example, of healing what my soul planned for me to heal from past lives. But I would go as far as to say it's not necessarily because it's been instantaneously healed, but in fact, that the value of the healing lives on because of the wisdom of the higher beings who come in those sessions. And that is, that's what we can help clients have access to in transpersonal and spiritual hypnotherapy, is access to the connections to the higher beings who have their interest at heart. So next slide, Holly. All right. Now, in my view, all right, this slide's about the general, and then I picked two because, again, I have no really good idea of time. So I have no idea if I was okay. And now I can see the clock on the wall. All right. But specifically, this is what I found almost universally, that the improvement comes when the client recognizes and accepts. Okay, the accept is as important as the recognizing the history and the origin of the false beliefs. All right. Now, to tease this out, many of us, maybe many people, get a story about our lives, right? And depending on how long you've lived, if you've been holding on to a story for a long time, it can take quite the shift to accept, oh, maybe the story's not exactly right. So when you're bringing in through these transpersonal sessions, totally different historical information, it really, for some people, can be, it can be jarring because it changes the story, right? That's the one thing. The good news, though, is it changes, to make the second point, the trajectory of how valuable the healing and therapeutic work can be, because it alters the chance for the person to form new beliefs, right? And from those new beliefs to begin living without dis-ease. Now, here's an example. I did not know this until I facilitated a session with somebody who died, excuse me again, pre-World War II. Pre-World War II, but as a result of the policies that came into being after the Russian Revolution. And one of the practical horrible things that happened was the land, which had been prior owned by individuals, and we're talking small plots of land, so these were subsistence farmers, were taken out of the ownership of individual people, and they were then owned by the USSR. I did not know until researching after a client session that somewhere in excess of 12 to 15 million people died of starvation based on that one action. Okay. Now, I don't know about you, but I have had a fair number of people on my caseload who, notwithstanding their current life and the bounty in their current life, hold a belief that there's a lack. There's not enough, right? There's not enough. There's a lack. There's a lack. People that excessively worry about money, even though they might have more than enough. All right. Well, this sense that there's not enough, if you died because somebody took your farm and you wasted away because you were also then driven off the land, blah, 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 as the stories unfold, you might currently hold a belief, even unaware of yourself, that there's not enough. There's never enough. I can never plan for enough calamities, right? So it's the value of seeing it in a historical concept. It's like a mini earthquake to the current beliefs that somebody holds about explaining, their current dis-ease. All right. Now, obviously, it goes without saying, it then begins, it's the process of forming new beliefs. Now, what I tell every client is this, really, these new beliefs have to be reinforced. And it's just like any, you try to teach yourself a new skill. If you're overriding an earlier skill, you have to practice. So this is a key, like a small thing, but a key thing is that I tell every client, you have to practice. It's not just enough that, oh, I now see, oh, there is enough, right? Okay, well, there is enough today, but tomorrow when you wake up and you're still feeling like there's not enough, you got to say, no, there is enough. So small but important point, that the new beliefs have to at least for the near future, be constantly reinforced and then winnowed out over time as the person observes their behavior changing. Now, a key for people that are really despondent and are trying this work because they've tried almost everything and they can't feel better is, once this, what I have listed above here, happens, the opening for hope to flourish. There's an opening for hope to flourish, right? And lots of people, once they lose hope, give up. And once you get to that point, it's really hard to help somebody facilitate change if they have no hope. Now, they're most likely not the people in your office, but losing hope is the kind of thing that people sit with quietly and may never share with the facilitator who's handling their session. or even their therapist. Depends on what the relationship is, how long it is, et cetera, et cetera. All right. Now, I've already made this point in a different way, but the therapeutic value is when people are reminded, they literally can feel, wait, again, remember I've said all these people are people that believe that we're more than just this person. So if this person is mired in feeling, this person of me is mired in desperation, and now I have this experience and I'm engulfed in total acceptance and total love, well, I'm reminded of what I would label my eternal state. I'm literally reminded that that's my eternal state. And remembering that then when I'm brought up out of the trance is an incredibly important component of the value of these sessions. All right, next slide. All right, now, I, again, because of time, just culled out two categories of groups of people that I actually have a lot of clients who've come with self-worth, self-acceptance issues. Oh, there's there's a redundancy up there. So I've used these to tell you specifically, in my experience, what the benefits have been for the people who've come self-worth, self-acceptance, and a corollary of that is they're doubting themselves big time. All right. So one benefit is the process or the experience gives the opportunity to evict the internal critic, right? The doubter who says, oh, you can't do that, or, oh, you're useless, right? It literally creates the opening, because once you realize, wait a minute, I've been telling myself that over the course of 400 years or 4 lifetimes or whatever. Once you really integrate that into your psyche and you're really seeking healing, then you realize, oh my God, he or she's got to go, that internal critic. I don't know if any of you have ever seen Loretta LaRouche, who they used to show her when PBS was trying to raise money. They would feature an hour or two thing about her, but she has this really funny thing where she talks about this internal critic that we're carrying around a board of directors. She called it the board of directors, and she does actually very powerful stress management work, but she could have been employed in successfully as a stand-up comic. So she's really funny. And she does this shtick about, are you carrying around, who's on your board of directors? And once you listen to what they're saying, you need to fire them, is the gist of her routine. And this is a really, really, really big point, because again, it goes back to the soul's plan and who the soul has invited to be the key players in its life. These are you people, souls who've agreed to not only play the happy roles, but they've also, some of them, agreed to be the thorns in our side. And it's those thorns in our side that are most likely on our committee, on our internal board of directors. And so there's a really big connection between recognizing, oh, wait, well, I really may have thought my mother was this, that, and the other thing, but wow, you mean I actually invited her soul to play that role? I mean, those of you who do like that degree of transpersonal work realize how powerful a shift it is when you get people to recognize it was their idea all along, right? I say to people, stop asking, why is this happening to me, right? I try to make light of it. That is not a good question. It's not, why is this happening to me? The question is, oh, if I planned this and it was a brilliant plan, what did I want to get out of it? So if I'm the person who thinks my mother was whatever, 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 and oh, she made me feel whatever, whatever, whatever. And then I find out, oh no, I brought those phrases in from like 4 lifetimes spanning 1,000 years. Then it's easier to make that shift. Okay. 1 second again. The more I talk, the more I need to drink. Okay, so once a person's capable, and this, of course, it doesn't happen instantaneously, but this is amazing when you see progress on this relatively quickly. Once they're able to do the first thing, then they're able to move into becoming the source of their own validation. And then relying on themselves as their inner compass. Now, before we got officially started, somebody was talking about making a decision based on, I think she didn't even say, label it intuition, but this is where like the inner compass and the inner intuition, we all know how invaluable that is, because that's our highest self, our soul self, whispers from eternity. Okay. It also sets the stage, and this might not happen instantaneously, but this is where, again, the wisdom from the higher beings kind of percolates out and bubbles out over time for the person to forgive themselves for either real or perceived transgressions, right? It's just incredible. Okay. And then ultimately to form a more realistic and accurate view of themselves. Now, this then leads for people to detach from the fallacies that were projected onto them by either themselves or other people and their own action. And then ultimately to replace what was before experienced as I'm useless, I'm worthless, I'm, all these negative terms, with this sense that they have now come to understand the origin of all of that, and now have begun what might be for some people a somewhat longer process of replacing all of that with more loving, positive, constructive phrasing. I say to people all the time, which is a big point that I'll end on, but if we don't learn to love ourselves, right, as we show others how to love us, or as we love ourselves, we're basically showing other people how to love us. And so helping somebody to understand the value of loving themselves is, to me, one of the kind of hallmark flags of transpersonal work, of getting the person to see this is where it came from, this is how it's connected now, and this is what you say you want. So how are we going to get you there? Okay. Holly, next slide. Okay, now, different for the group of clients that I would characterize as having either limited ability to take care of themselves or either limited or it's non-existent. Okay, now, the common thing for the clients I've worked with on this is they think or have thought in the past that the word no, it's like a biohazard, right? They can't bring themselves to say no to people, literally, right? So to call them overextended is an understatement. I have one client who was literally told by the guide, well, actually two, told by the guides, if you don't change this, you'll be dead in the near future, right? And it took for both of them hearing that, right? To hear that like being told, if you don't change this, if you don't start saying no, you won't be around to say yes all the time, right? I mean, it's right. It sounds like it's logical, but as those of us, all of us doing transpersonal work, no, logic doesn't necessarily dominate our existing behavior. Okay. Now, that then helps the person burst the guilt bubble, because inevitably the person who can't say no has a long list of reasons why saying yes all the time is the right thing, right? So they're saying yes a lot. They're saying yes because no would be disastrous, right? Whether it's buying a car. I have one client bought the 4th car for the now 30-year-old son who's still living in the house after he crashed the first 3. Like, at what point do you say, no, buying a car for him is not a good idea, right? I mean, the extremes make the point, but it's even disastrous when it's less extreme. All right. Now, so once you can help the person burst the guilt bubble, the guilt bubble. The other part of that is many people, and this for some of those, it's a artifact of their early religious upbringing. Taking care of themselves somehow equates with being selfish. So the idea of being selfish was either a sin or it was a horrible thing to be. So how can I take care of myself? I can't be selfish, right? So that's a part of like helping through the work, break the belief that somehow taking care of yourself, like, you know, and the best example of that, I'm sure we all use it, is when, you know, you're on an airplane and they say, put the oxygen mask on yourself, because passing out because you put it on the next person for, you know, when you weren't done isn't going to help them or you, right? Put the mask on yourself. It's a great, small, but important example of doing, why doing that's so important. All right. So I don't know about all of you, but I've had a lot of clients that have a lot of trouble getting themselves on their list of priorities. Now, this includes people who've already raised children, right? So you can understand this perspective when the person says to you, you know, my kids are all under 10. But for the person who's like empty nested and their kids aren't living with them anymore, the idea, well, I can't say no to them. It just doesn't, it's like, right, it's not about them. It often is about the person, and then getting to the root of why you weren't on your list. Well, I wasn't on my list because I've had these prior lives in which that wasn't allowed, or not only wasn't allowed, that was punished, and maybe at a high cost. Right? And then, of course, the second piece is helping the person then move up the list, on the list, getting them, because there's some people that so react to the idea of being on the list, you can't even approach in the first conversation the idea. And again, this goes back to where in my work, the spiritual counseling comes in, the counseling that happens afterwards of moving up on the list, because first they have to get cozy with the idea it's okay to be on the list. All right. All right. And then the person begins to feel relief, because truly taking care of everyone can not only almost lead to your own death, but it can be incredibly overwhelming, as most of us know. So when the client reaches that point, they begin to feel how good it can feel to not have to say yes all the time, right? And that, of course, then leads to them feeling physically and emotionally better about themselves and doing things that make themselves feel better. Okay, so those are specific to those two. And then Holly, if you could go. All right, so these are just some general closing comments about really all of those 3 categories of the therapeutic value. So, and this is in terms of why I consider this work synonymous with spiritual, you know, hypnotherapy, transpersonal work for me is one and the same, is once you get to the idea that we're eternal souls, we're eternal beings, we come back, we change how we show up, but nonetheless, we keep coming back, and there's a part of us that lasts, you know, that lasts and goes on and on and on. For me, that's clearly the spiritual challenge for people, is to learn to love themselves. But the further the client, the more progress the client makes in healing these emotional challenges, the more easily they can learn to love themselves, which what I help people understand in my spiritual counseling work is that's really what their soul intended. Their soul intended in the at the highest level, let's get all this clutter out of the way so the soul can experience peace and harmony and balance and find joy in life as opposed to angst, aggravation, pain, suffering. All right. Now, this was the point I threw in before. So really, when you think about it, and I don't mean to minimize what we do, but even if, you said collectively, all the people in IBRT served, 100,000 people and whatever that number is, it's still, over decades in contrast to now there's almost 8 billion people. And so you have to, in my view, as a transpersonal hypnotherapist, be constantly remembering that the soul, really, the soul sent us here, each of us here, had a plan. I tell people, you're not only, the starring player in the role, the life that's your current, in the play that's your current, to use that metaphor, life. You're not only the star, you were the executive producer, the director, the star, but you were also the casting director. You decided who in your soul family, to use that nomenclature, you were going to invite to play the key roles. And once you put what we do day to day into that context, for me, I think we've opened the door, not just for this lifetime learning and healing and karmic balancing, but we literally have given our clients the ammunition to leapfrog themselves through higher realms in the astral realm. So life, that was my quote. I couldn't remember before, my own quote. Life is therapy in slow motion. It truly is therapy in slow motion. If I, through whatever, maybe it takes me 30 years, learn that there is no lack. And so I end this life without that belief, even if I never met any of us or any of our colleagues. If I finally put aside that, there is no lack, right? And I put it aside, well, I've freed myself then to, leapfrog. So I actually think life is therapy in slow motion. And I, for our clients, for my clients, for example, who I already told you are quite well read, the more I think in terms of professionals, the more we read case histories, hear our colleagues talk about their clients, what they've culled from their sessions with their clients, the more depth we have in our understanding, I just think the greater facilitators we will be. So those are my clients who are avid readers. I encourage them, keep reading, because as you go through life, you can, if you're a 360, what do they call it? A 360 learner. If you're looking in all directions, up, down, the people you report to, the people you're, colleagues with, the people you serve, if you're looking in all directions to see how people are living, what they're learning, how they're faring, you've actually multiplied out what you can, as one human being, learn, and specifically one human being who might access transpersonal spiritual hypnotherapy. So I would urge you as colleagues to just encourage your clients to do the same. Keep their eyes and ears open, because life is therapy in slow motion. All right, so I'm going to stop there to answer, and I just included, but this stuff is at the top of the other piece that you received. So anyway. And I'll take a breath and I'll try to, there's all the people. Okay. All right. That's why I kept looking over there. Sorry. Everybody was over there for a while. So does anybody have any questions, comments, challenges? Virginia, yeah.
I just wanted to share this one piece of wisdom that I read in a book many years ago. And it's the definition of selfishness versus, or being selfish and self-love, like acting out of selfishness or acting out of self-love. And the author said, imagine that you're standing in front of the light and you are standing such that no one else can get what they need. That's selfish. But if you are standing in the light so that you get what you need, but you make sure that others can have what they need as well, that's self-love.
Mm-hmm.
And I've kept that with me because many times I've had to ask myself, am I being selfish or am I acting out of self-love? And that's how I define or differentiate. I just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Yeah. Hey. Nobody needs to be on mute, by the way, at this point, in my opinion. So we could have a discussion. Would make sense. But I can't see anybody's name. So if I don't already know you, I'm sorry. Or if I can't, I have bifocals.
If you move your cursor onto their square on the
yeah,
bottom left.
Thank you. This is why Holly was doing. Watching me do a PowerPoint is not a pretty sight. I'm not kidding, no matter how many times I do it. Oh God. Anyway, wait, I'll even tell you one worse than this. It was only 25 minutes before this group was started, and I realized, oh gosh, I never responded that I would be on the meeting. So I didn't have anything. I was like, oh my God. Oh, Lord help me. Anyway. Peter, yeah.
For taking your clients up into that realm, up to the higher vibration, if you will, having experience as a hypnotherapist and now doing the transpersonal aspect of it, do you have a particular tool that you use that helps to disengage them from your typical hypnotherapy and on up into the light by counting to 10 3 times? I don't know, anything that you use to boost them up to that level?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. Okay, so nothing like a bad session to lead you to. All right, so I'll be honest, I'm into overkill. All right, now I have had people collapse on this couch. I can get you on this couch in 4 seconds from standing to on this couch. But in the case of this work, first of all, I spend a whole hour talking to the person. Now they have no idea that as I'm telling them key things, I'm also already, right,
exactly,
desensitizing their anxiety. All right, but I'm also, by the way, I guess I should say this out loud. So I can't tell you how many people, you've probably had this happen, come in and say, oh, I had a session with somebody else and I didn't learn anything. Right. Okay, fine. So then I say, okay, well, what was the orientation is the gist of it? And they're like, oh, well, I kind of walked in the door, we said a greeting, and then he hypnotized me or she hypnotized me. Okay, so, all right. So an hour, I'm not lying, where I tell people, and I probably have colleagues who would tell me I shouldn't be telling them something, but I tell people, I basically describe the continuum, I label it, of the way you're going to get the information. Now, some people see it, some people see it as slides, some people smell it, some people get, taste it, some people feel it, right? And then I go into the intuitive. Now, after I do that, I've got a bunch of other key things, including, and this might be controversial, but because I've had so many clients who found out that they had been a ghost in a past life, I make sure I tell everybody, well, it's very possible you might have not crossed over right away, right? Okay, so I'm desensitizing people to that. I know I'm giving you a long answer, but anyway, I'm also desensitizing them to the fact that they may have killed themselves in a past life, because I've had so many clients who found out that they killed themselves in the past life. And the first client who did, he literally ran out of my office. I mean, he popped himself up out of the trance and he literally wouldn't stay, right? Never had that happen again. Okay, no kidding. So I desensitize them to the more sensational things they might find out, including that they might have an attachment who they may or may not have known in a past life, this life, or any life, because it was a spirit who happened to be, quote, in the neighborhood. So after I go through that, and I go through all this, so now I've had you for an hour. And now your conscious mind, I think I've covered all the things that are going to make you a wreck, potentially, because I don't know you pretty much. Now I belabor the point. My body relaxer is like, oh my God, I'm half asleep myself, just going through it. All right. But then I do, which I think is really the key. I do the count up, open your eyes, right? 3 times. So now this is key for me, because if you're still opening your eyes on the second time, well, no, you might still be opening them, but if you're not like having trouble opening them the second time, I know I'm going to have a little more work to do. But 98%, if not 99% of the people, by the third time, they cannot open their eyes. So now I'm pretty sure I got them in a deep trance, but because some people have proven me wrong, I've got this other thing that bores me to death, but it works, in which I tell them, okay, and, make it up the story, how you introducing this is the most awkward part. All right, well, now we're going to start counting back from 100. And when I say a even number, you're going to open your eyes, you're going to feel good. This, this one. And then when I say the odd number, you're going to close your eyes, right? Well, honest to God, for the few people I've had to do that with, but now I'm into 20 plus. I might even be at a half hour right now, because this has like been going on. This is an hour. Now I'm into this 20 minutes, a half hour. All right. But for the few people, there's only been, well, I'll say 2, but 2 people that didn't work for. All right. So now I'm pretty sure I've got them in the astral world, right? That I've got them into that deep enough trance. So, but I don't give up then. Now I'm like, oh, you're floating, blah, blah, blah. You're floating free. No body. Isn't this great? Okay. Now using your mind's eye, I want you to picture this huge white building. Now I tell them, we're going to float to the Akashic records. Now, this is my next and last test, because once I get them in there, now I still don't know if I've got somebody who's going to react to any words that are about sight, right? So I'm still wondering, is this somebody, how careful do I have to be using those words? So I throw in this thing. All right, now most people now they're in the central corridor, central rotunda. They haven't noticed on their way in that there's a corridor off to the right. Now, if you're ready, because now, by the way, I've asked them 3 times, do you want to keep going? Right. So I've asked them 3 times, we're going to keep going. Right. So now if the conscious mind is really still against this. All right. 3 times it's had a chance to say, no, I'm not going. All right. Anyway, we're going to go down this corridor. But this is what's great. I don't even know who taught me this, but anyway, whoever it was brilliant. So now I say, I do these counts and I get them in the corridor and I slow down. You're going to sense the energy. You're going to know your higher self's going to tell you which door to go through. And on the count of 3, you're going to know. And then I clap my hands so I know where on the audio this part is. So I don't have to listen to all that. I'm just like, all right. And this is what's amazing, because this I threw in not maybe 3 years ago. I started asking, tell me, can you describe that door you stopped in front of? Is it just a regular door with a rectangular top? And much to my thankful surprise, 99% of the people start telling me what their door looks like. So now I know I'm dealing with somebody who, when I get them on the other side of the door, at least they think they're going to be able to tell me what they see. So if they don't see something, now I'm going to more quickly go, oh, do you have a body? Right? Oh, and then people, I'm sure, right? Those of you who asked that question, no, people like get a little surprised. Do I have a body? And then like they think about it. Well, the ones that don't say, well, no. Most of them, some of them say, well, I don't know. So then I go there. Well, so by then, I'm pretty sure we're going to have a good session. But then again, like everybody has experienced, every once in a while, because every once in a while, when you get the person, their conscious mind is still panicked. And this is interesting. I'd love to hear what people think of this, because I'm convinced in these circumstances that the subconscious, like what I'm not clear of, I got them in the superconscious, right? I've got them in the astral world. They've leapfrogged over their subconscious. But the subconscious, I think, is what knows why they don't want to find out what they might be on the verge of finding out. I'm going to give you an example in a minute. And so then somehow, I think, but I'd love to hear what other people think, the subconscious, like as if it nudged the conscious mind and the person opens their eyes and says, oh, no, I'm not going there, kind of thing. And here's the example. This is the best example. So for my friends, no, for my family and close friends, I would never take money. So they like have a standing offer that I would do a session if they want, right? Okay. And this particular friend had that standing offer for 10 years. All right. And never took me up on it. And so 8 years ago, no, 2 years ago, 8 years in, I gave her a copy of Brian Weiss's Many Lives, Many Masters, because I knew she wasn't ready for anything, right? Like past that level, right? Didn't even give her my books. We're talking about my books, talking about writing the books, blah, blah, blah. But I knew she couldn't go there. So anyway, 2 years later, she says to me, I think I'd like to have a session. Okay, fine. Perfect. This is a perfect example. So real quick, all right, I still have a few minutes. Real quick, I get her in a trance. And now this is like we're on a tour. She's in New York City and she's telling me, like we're on a tour. Oh, there's this, there's this, there's this. And then she popped herself up the first time. Well, that's the other thing. I'm like a dog with a bone. And I'd probably get thrown out of school if I was back in school. But if I don't have somebody coming after somebody, I'm not looking at the clock, right? I'm kind of looking at the clock, but I'm not worried about, 2.5 hours, 3 hours is almost up kind of thing for a regular session, not an LBL. All right. So nobody was coming after her. I didn't have to look at the clock. She pops herself back up and okay, now we got to go through all the boring stuff again and go back down. All right, fine. But obviously, as everybody probably on the phone, on a call knows, all right, now that's a clue. We're getting close, right? We're going to find something out. All right, now we're back in New York City, honest to God, like we're on the same tour. And she's telling me this, that, the other thing. Second time, she pops herself up again. All right. And I get her back down. All right. Now, the third time, I'm clear. There's something really sensational that's whether it's the conscious mind or the subconscious mind or the two of them working together, they don't want it revealed, right? But I persist. And the next thing that happens, she was in that recliner. I don't know if you can see, there's a recliner there, right? Okay, it's really comfortable. She's in that recliner and all of a sudden she leans up, she grabs her head and she says, oh my God, my head hurts. Now she's still in a trance. I can tell she's still in a trance. So I said to her, do I have your permission to talk to the pain? She says, yeah. So I start talking to the pain. This is the story that they didn't want to come out. In her immediate past life, her father in that life picked her up out of the crib and intentionally dropped her on her head and she died. Now, those of you that do LBL work know that's only part of the story, obviously, and probably, although I don't know for sure because she hasn't asked to do the second session yet, probably the subconscious mind or the conscious mind at some level, I can't really figure out where this information might be actively stored, knows that her father in that life is probably a loved one in this life. And that's why they were popping her up. Right? Because heaven forbid, because to be honest, she hasn't done a lot of this work. And if she wasn't my friend, she might have never accessed this work. So dealing with that is a big deal if you don't have the context that I just spent the last hour plus talking about, right? So my question to all of you is, where do you think, because this is a real puzzlement to me, where is that knowledge actively being stored? Because it wasn't oh, I forgot to say the thing that I laugh about, which is her soul was not letting her get out of the room. Like it was, I finally got her in. This is really what I think. Her soul's saying, I finally got her in this room. I finally got her in this session. No, we're not going. We're not leaving. We're not leaving. 3 times I got her in back down into that trance, right? I mean, most people, they wouldn't have gone back. Maybe the 3rd time, maybe they might have gone back the 2nd time, right? I mean, I in my own head, I'm thinking, oh, this is so brilliant how these higher realms are. But what I can't figure out is where is this other piece or even that stored that she like pops up multiple times to try to get out of the room. Anybody have any thoughts? Everybody? Peter? Yeah.
My thought was, if we're talking with the higher self, invite the higher self to come forth and ask the higher self, what's causing her to pop up? What's the block? Because the higher self should know, and ask it just simply to come forth and talk through her.
Okay, but I'm asking a broader question.
Okay.
For cutting across clients, where might that information be so close to the surface that somebody pops up? Yeah, Holly, jump in, everybody.
Because the person isn't well resourced enough to know how to handle the information and integrate it. If they're resourced beforehand and they have access to that higher self's wisdom, love, understanding, support, non-judgmental aspect, they might be more able to go through it. That's what I would think. I don't know.
Yeah. Now, by the way, this is an interesting piece of the story that I didn't say. Well, now's the time to say it. So when I brought her up, she was stunned, but then she goes on to tell me that sometime in the last 10 years, and I did not know this had happened, she had a major neurological event that doctors spent the better part of a year trying to get to the bottom of and never figured out what caused the event. And I just think that's such well, in some ways, an extreme example, because like Holly just pointed out, this particular friend isn't well resourced to be able to process this, but here she had this major neurological event. It dragged on for 9 months plus. And here she is a couple of years later, finding out in my last life, I was dropped on my head and I died, right? It's like, there's the soul to me in the neurological event screaming out, waving, almost waving, hey, pay attention here. Virginia, you're on mute. Oh, and then Susan, sorry, Susan, I skipped over. Susan had.
I'll be real quick, Susan. I would want to know where in the brain did that event take place? and where in the brain of that baby was the damage done.
Well, that's interesting.
That's just a thought.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Susan.
Very interesting.
Well, I'm not sure my answer or my proposed answer is deep enough, really. You know, Richard Schwartz's parts therapy.
Yeah.
He talks about there's one subpersonality that is protecting the false belief that's keeping the repressed event from coming back up. I mean, so that would be a part of the subconscious, that particular subpersonality that's really super vigilant to keep that information down
Mm,
and doesn't have the whole picture at all.
right, right, right. Because the whole picture's in the superconscious, in my view. Does everybody agree? Sort of, kind of?
Would that sub-personality be part of the current life?
Yeah, that's why I thought it might not be deep enough. Yeah. But
Well,
maybe
if it's part of the current life is job is, or the believed job is, I got to keep this repressed no matter what. But that's the current life self. And the higher mind says, we got to get this healed.
Mhm. Not only that, that's why I sent you to have this problem to begin. Right, right,
Yeah.
right. It's fascinating. All right. So Holly, before I just want to ask you, how many minutes left do we have?
It's actually about time right now.
Okay, so I'll just say
An
this
hour and a half.
briefly then. Okay, so I've been asked by some people, and this you'll find more elaborated in the 6-page, not the slideshow, the other piece. All right, I've been asked by people, outside of this, would you describe it sort of, transpersonal work as a miracle cure? And so, of course, the answer is on the surface, no, because it's really, it really works more like traditional psychotherapy in that it resolves problems of the heart and the mind and the emotions and doesn't address when there's heavy biochemical or physiological, physiobiological reasons contributing to the problem. However, this is a food for thought and future exploration. So those of you, and probably maybe everybody on the call tonight, has already read Anita Moorjami's Dying to Be Me and Eben Alexander's Proof of Heaven. And they are incredible examples, just two, but incredible examples of how there was literally spontaneous healing in two people's lives who were a thread away from death. And in the awareness they gained in the astral space, they were able to make a choice to make the change that kept them alive. So to me, we're in that space. And so the question that seems to raise for me is, on the surface, you would say, no, this is not, a miracle cure, but how is the healing that takes place in transpersonal work so different from those two examples of spontaneous remission they were both like threads away from death, totally different examples, but threads away from death. And I just think, it's that kind of question that we involved in this work have to keep asking, and that's just one example of why I said earlier that I am so in awe of what we don't yet know. Because we only know what we're privy to have found out in the last, 45, 50 years, roughly, basically. I mean, I know past life regressions have happened since ancient times, but in the volume and in the cumulative understanding that this work has generated over the last 5 decades, that's all we know, right? Interestingly to me, we've begun to learn all that at the same time that people started to learn all of the tentacles of surviving a near-death experience, while other people in other parts of the world were learning what you can find out when you can travel spontaneously out of body into the astral world without drugs or whatever. So to me, it's just, I am in awe of my being an observer of the astral space and what it's taught me already about our eternal journey. But I'm as excited about what's still to come as much as I am what we've already learned. And to me, that's the excitement of doing this work. So food for thought. Food for thought.
Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you all. Thank
Fabulous.
us all for our work.
Thank you.
Well, I would like to ask if one of you would step forward and offer a little blessing to all of us and this work that we're all engaged in as a way to have closure tonight. And also appreciation for what Joanne brought to our circle. Anybody? Just be spontaneous. No? Okay, then I'll do it in honor of all of us. And with a full heart and a blown mind, once again, we are challenged to continue our process of growing and sharing and synthesizing this fabulous work that we get to do. And it is an absolute joy and pleasure to have contact with each of us as part of a growing community. And we give thanks for the honor of supporting our clients and the honor of doing this soul work with such passion and dedication to the transformation of consciousness, which is so desperately needed right now on Mother Earth. So we look forward
Lovely.
to our next gathering, and we are looking for a presenter for next month. We do not have a volunteer yet for next month. So if any of you are thinking about wanting to share one of your tools or one of your approaches, it would be wonderful. And then the month after, we're going to have one of our long-term members named Elaine Hodge, who's going to present some of the work that she's developed as a psychotherapist who's also transpersonally oriented and a past life regression therapist. So that'll be in March. But for next month, we are trying to manifest the next presentation. So let me know if you're interested. And once again, Joanne, thank you so much.
Welcome. It was a pleasure. Thank you. Thank
Great.
you all for your attention.
Joanne will be in touch.
Okay. All right.
And now you can look at those 8 pages that she diligently put together for us. Okay.
Thank you. Good
Bye.
night, everyone. Thanks, Holly, for all your help.
Bye.
Bye.